Hello and welcome back to the County Chat previews for 2025. We're getting all the way through the Division 1 teams. As the season progresses, we'll be looking into their team and seeing how they're going to be looking for the 2025 season. And we're up to 7th place from last year. It's the Bears from Birmingham. Warwickshire are going to be the team we're previewing this episode. They finished 7th, as I say, but actually only won one game last year. Very similar to Nottinghamshire, the team we previewed last, in the sense that they struggled to win a lot of games, but they didn't lose very often, and they even more so, to be fair, because winning only one game and not going down is slightly an indictment on the system of how many points you get for a draw, but that's maybe a whole nother discussion. But anyway, Warwickshire stayed up with only one win last year, and they'll be looking to do the same this year, and maybe, hoping to do a bit better. So going into 2025, Warwickshire have moved on from the Mark Robinson era, if you will. They parted by mutual consent as head coach. He's been replaced by a former Bears player and a part of his backroom staff. It's Ian Westwood, who will be sort of taken from an assistant to head coach as sort of an internal hire. But the captain, on the other hand, for the sort of leadership group, I guess if you'd call it, will remain the same. Alex Davies, who led the England Lions, will be remaining in his role as captain of Warwickshire. I guess the fact that he was captain of England Lions shows us kind of a good amount of support for his sort of leadership style, or just ability to lead a good and winning team, because England Lions captain, I guess, is kind of a very underratedly prestigious honour, I think, for kind of county cricket players who might not break into the England setup. I think if you can manage to be the captain of the England Lions, you're probably going to be looking like you're in a good place as a player, or as a player for your county. So yeah, as I said to begin with, we'll be sort of focusing, as I always do, on one aspect of the game, or phase of the game, which is a bit more weak, and then we'll talk about the sort of stronger aspect near the end of the episode. But to begin with, I think, a lot of these previews have talked about if you don't win a lot of games and you draw a lot of games, usually it's quite obvious, or would be a normal progression of thought, to say that the bowling is a weakness, because you can stay in a game, not win it, because you haven't taken the 20 wickets to win a game. That's kind of the unique thing about red ball cricket, and unique thing about first class cricket. The thing that means people don't understand it is that after 4 days you can have a draw, or in test match cricket after 5 days you can have a draw. So yeah, you would have expected, I think you would say bowling is a weakness for Warwickshire going into 2025, especially given they've had 2 injuries to probably their 2 sort of most senior and premier fast bowler or seam bowlers in Hannon Dolby and Rushworth. But having said that, I think you probably see where I'm going with this. I'm actually going to say their batting is more of their weakness for 2025. A few reasons for that. It's kind of headlined by the departure of 2 very big parts of their team last year, in Will Rhodes and Michael Burgess, the wicketkeeper batsman. So anyway, let's get into their batting and see why I see it's a bit of a weakness going into 2025. That weakness is certainly not in their opening pair. The Bears' batting is headlined by a very talented opening pair, I guess. Alex Davies, the captain I mentioned, has just come off a brilliant season for Warwickshire. He scored 1,115 runs at an average just north of 50. He opens the batting alongside a lefty, so sort of a left-hand, right-hand combination of Rob Yates. He's a proven run scorer, and I watched it in round 1 against my Sussex team. He scored a brilliant 100 in that first innings, and looks the part. And when Rob Yates is on full flow, he's a very, very pleasing batter to watch. But when these two bat together, they can often get off to a very quick start, and get bowling units on the back foot. I think if these two don't play well, it'll be a quick reason why this team's batting lineup will look very, very shaky. But I think if they are having 2 very big seasons, let's say Alex Davies has a similar season to what he did last year, and Rob Yates maybe goes on to sort of a career best year where he goes above that 1,000 run mark. I think this Warwickshire batting lineup could stand up still, but I think they kind of need them to do that for Warwickshire to stay in Division 1 genuinely with their batting lineup this year, with some injuries and some departures, as I mentioned. Another reason, alongside those 2 people who've left, and Will Rhodes going to Durham, and Michael Burgess retiring very shockingly, is that Tom Latham, who's been was their signing, who's a big star for New Zealand, has been their captain, and is one of their sort of key batters. He was coming over as a replacement signing, and I think anyone who knows their cricket would probably say is a very good replacement for sort of both aspects: a top order batter who can keep wicket to a very good level, to an international standard. But he, whilst sort of playing in practicing for a game for his county side in New Zealand for Canterbury, broke his finger. It's always difficult with finger breaks, especially for wicket keepers, knowing how long that's going to take, or how long you're going to return to just batting before maybe you can return to keeping, or just in general how long it takes, because it's kind of a unique injury, and fingers can heal in very weird ways, especially cricketers who may have broken them quite a few times. So I think his delay, it just is another reason why I think this batting lineup is looking quite fragile for 2025. Again, I'm recording this off the back of Warwickshire just chased down plus 300 at Durham on day 4. So there's not much to suggest this is maybe a real worry, but I think it's just one of those where it could prove across the season, especially if Tom Latham doesn't come along for a long period of time, or maybe New Zealand higher ups sort of decide it's not good for him to be playing on it. I don't think that would be the case. I think Warwickshire will have a good contract set up with Latham, and as soon as he's fit, he probably will come straight along. But I just think he's another reason why it's a bit of a worry for this batting lineup. I think the batting has got plenty of talent in it to do well enough. It's just an interesting look into 2025. Anyway, batting at 3, he would be Tom Latham, so replacing Will Rhodes. So Will Rhodes, I think, in my opinion, it's about as big of a loss as a team can get, really. I mean, he's a top 3 batter. He scored 1,020 runs last year, whilst also being a fast medium bowler, or medium fast bowler, who kind of can work as your fourth seamer if you really needed him to. That kind of diversity and ability to do that as a team is really, really important. And I think Will Rhodes not being able to do that, or not being he'll be able to do it for Durham in batting in that top 3 and having a good bowling, time, if you will. He's got a career bowling average of under 35. I mean, that's not to withstand him being a top 3 batter who's, scored thousands of runs in first-class cricket. Will Rhodes is a very talented bowler in his own right. So I think without Tom Latham being able to replace him straight away, it will be a massive drop-off to sort of the people who have been looking to change him. And as I've written here, it's a bit of a collective effort, I feel, over the course of the season, especially if Latham doesn't come along. I think there'll be a few different people put in that role, because batting 3 in a Division 1 side is not easy. It's a lot of good bowling lineups you're going to have to face, and similar to opening batting, of course, but there's a plenty of difficulty to bat in that spot, and I need a cool and calmed head. To begin the season, they've gone for the youth option, if you will. Hamza Sheikh, who's an 18-year-old, has been given the chance for the first 3 matches so far. And again, I feel like he's a very talented cricketer. I've seen him bat a few times, and he looks the part. He is just 18, and I think his technique will be put under real examination against some of the better fast bowling units in Division 1, which there are plenty and are very, very skillful. Again, it's not to say I don't think he doesn't have talent. I just think my opinion on batting is it is a skill to be honed. It's one that does take time. And as an 18-year-old, you just won't have faced anything like the people he's going to be facing. Of course, there's people who stand out as youngsters all the time, but I just think it will be a season where it'll be a lot of good experience and good learning, but I just don't think he'll be able to score anywhere near the amount of runs that Will Rhodes scores, for example. I think he'd have a good season if he got up to 500 runs, say, sort of thing. I just think he doesn't have the time to hone his skill set against top order bowlers, really. I think it's as simple as that. Following him, though, will be a proven player. Sam Hain usually operates around 4 for Warwickshire. Again, he's an absolute run machine in white ball cricket. If anyone knows, he sort of averages nearly 60 in List A cricket. As I say, he's just a bit of a run machine. But his red ball form, it never really dips below his red ball average of around 40. He's very consistent, and he's very important for this side this year, I think, to have that stability, because I think someone like Sam Hain will really need to stand up without Tom Latham, without Will Rhodes, obviously, this season. Ahead of him, I think he will kind of almost be batting a bit more like a 3 than he'd probably coming in a bit earlier than he'd like. Again, unless Davies and Rob Yates can kind of get that start going. And again, he'll be looking for a full season. He only played in 8 matches in 2024. So again, Warwickshire will really need him to be fit probably for all 14. I think he'll be very important, his runs in the top order. Down a spot here would be Dan Mosley. Dan Mosley is an incredibly talented cricketer. He's already been picked for England in white ball cricket as a sort of spin bowling all-rounder. He's a batting all-rounder who bowls spin, if that makes sense. But he's never really had a big season in red ball cricket. He's a batting all-rounder, as I say, and he's got a lot of talent. He had a pretty lean year with the bat last year. He only averaged around 25, I think it was. I think it's safe to say his batting ability is much higher than that. I think you just have to watch him play a few times to know that. But again, it's sometimes a bit more, in red ball cricket, it's a bit more application and concentration that are important towards you scoring runs, maybe less so than your talent. So yeah, it will be interesting to see how Dan Mosley does. And I think it is he is someone who is not necessarily a question mark, but he's definitely not necessarily 100%. He's going to score you 800 to 1,000 runs, etc., etc. He's just he's just a young cricketer. I think in any level of cricket, young cricketers are often very talented and exciting, but sometimes they don't have the kind of consistency. And you could see that in league cricket to any division to the village level, or you could see it in first division of county cricket. It is the nature of younger players, and I think it's the nature of cricket, in my humble opinion. Anyway, in at 6, I think, Warwickshire have a real strength, and I think they have one of the premier county cricket all-rounders in Ed Barnard. Barnard, in my opinion, about as good as it gets when it comes to first-class all-rounders. Across 120 first-class matches, he scored over 5,000 runs and take over 300 wickets. An average with the ball of around 30 and an average with bat of around 35. And as an all-rounder, if you looked at, the history of Test cricketers and you saw people who'd done that, it would be a very select few. And I think the same goes for red ball cricket in first-class cricket. It's an incredibly important role to have a very good all-rounder. And I think he is about as good as it gets, really. Well, there's plenty of good ones throughout Division 1 especially, but he is a real stalwart, sort of consistently at the top of run scorings and wicket taking for an all-rounders, if you will. So yeah, he had a big year with the bat last year. He averaged nearer 40, so a bit of a tick up on his career averages. I think his contributions in that middle order will be really, really important, again, because of the stuff around him, as I've been mentioning, and the sort of unproven talent, other than maybe Sam Hain and the openers. It will be interesting to see how he does in 2025. Now, yeah, so going on to another one of the losses from last year. So if going into this season, you would have expected Michael Burgess to be batting around 7 and taking the gloves, an excellent wicketkeeper batsman. And you think he was 32, and he retired. Basically wanted to go in another way to cricket, and fair enough to him. All power to him, and hopefully has a good good life post-cricket. But, for Warwickshire, it was not a great bit of news, because he averaged 44 with the bat last year. He's had a career average as a wicketkeeper sort of around 35, and then it just kept trending upwards and upwards and upwards. And I think it was getting nearer 40 by the time he was retiring. So, and as a wicketkeeper batsman in first-class cricket, you don't get a lot better than that, really. Very consistent around that mark of 35 to 40, an average of 35 to 40 each year, and a lot of times sort of between 700 and 900 runs as a wicketkeeper batsman is incredibly good numbers. So, yeah, again, it's just another case of it's a difficult person to replace. It's not easy getting people who are kind of at the peak of their career, and then if they retire, trying to replace them with young players, internationals, whatever. I think, Tom Latham was an incredibly savvy signing for the kind of dual purposes, I say, of replacing a top-order batter and a wicketkeeper, but you just can't withstand for injuries in sport or in cricket, and, it's just the nature of the game is that you can have freak injuries like that happen. Again, hopefully for Warwickshire's sake, Tom Latham's finger will be absolutely fine by the mid-season and he'll be able to play a lot of cricket. But to begin with, he's had to be replaced, Michael Burgess is, by a very young player. Kai Smith has been the wicketkeeper batsman so far this season. He's looked very promising in white ball cricket, scored quite a few runs in white ball cricket in recent years, in the years that have kind of become sort of the youth proving ground with the 100 going on at the same time as the One Day Cup. But Kai Smith has looked very good in that, and I think he's looked very promising to start this season. He's looked very good with the gloves. I think he's probably looked a little bit more apart than Hamza Sheikh has, and just the nature of maybe batting at 7 helps that. But yeah, it's no matter how good Kai Smith is, it is a noticeable drop-off for Michael Burgess. Michael Burgess is an incredibly hard person to replace, as I've mentioned. It's not. I've written here. It's not to bash these younger players. It's not to say they're not good. I think they're both more than talented enough to make great careers playing red ball cricket and great careers playing, professional cricket. It's just to say that I think cricket is a skill-based sport, and I think a lot of the time it takes a little bit of time before you hit the kind of your career averages. There's often a little dip before you end up getting towards what you're actually going to be as a cricketer, if you will, just sort of numerically, but also just in the sense of as how they look. yeah, anyway, so someone like Tom Clark for Sussex was a good example of that. He has career averages in the 20s, but if you ever looked at him bat, you would have thought he did better. To start the season this year against Division 1 talent, he's done really well and scored a big 100 against Warwickshire, funny enough. But it's one of those, it does take you time as a young player to sort of find your feet in any case, in any sport. But I think cricket is a particularly that way informed. Going on to Durham University's own Michael Booth he's a bowler who will be looking, I think he's a bowling all-rounder to be fair at this point, and especially how important he was in that Durham chase. I think I would have probably talked a bit less about his batting. He's a bowling all-rounder, as I say, who has got some real talent, but his ability to bat at the bottom of the order will be incredibly important, especially with what I've been mentioning above him. Again, he scored, I think, nearly 100 runs across the 2 innings in that Durham game. He scored 58 not out in the first and 40-odd with the bat in the second. So I think he's proven that maybe he'll be able to supplement that batting lineup a little bit more than maybe I was expecting going into this season. I think even as a mate and as a fan of his, I didn't think he'd be doing as well as he has done. But he with the bat, if it makes sense, but he is definitely doing well. So it'll be interesting to see how he does across the whole season, batting it around that 8 spot, or maybe a bit lower if they fill the barn up with a few more all-rounders. And speaking of all-rounders, centrally contracted players like Chris Wokes and Jacob Bethel, who I believe both have IPL contracts, if they kind of return to the form for Warwickshire, again, can change the outlook of this Bears lineup very quickly, especially sort of on both ends of it, really. Chris Wokes and Bethel both sort of giving both with bat and ball. But again, I don't know how long they'll be available for. I don't know how much they'll be looking into being part of the plans for England this summer. I think they'll both be big parts of the England plans for this summer. So I think whether or not how much they'll be able to play, but I think in the time they'll be able to play, they'll be a big help for Warwickshire in the sense of any international cricketer coming back. Yeah, so this for now, and Tom Latham's season being in limbo, are the reasons I'm kind of sceptical about Warwickshire's lineup. I think there's plenty of Division 1 talent in the team, especially in the batting lineup. But I just think it's just a bit of a miss of proven players with the removal of Rhodes and Burgess from the lineup. So it's just interesting to see, without Tom Latham, how they will be doing. As I say, in the recording of the time I've been sort of writing and recording this, Warwickshire have won a very, very close game up at Chesterley Street, whilst chasing quite a big score on the fourth day pitch. So maybe I'm totally unfounded, and these batters will all be able to sort of stand up to the mark and be able to look the part, I guess. But it just is a case of me looking at the numbers and me looking at the personnel. I would suggest the batting might be more of a weakness than maybe we would, Warwickshire might have hoped for going into 2025. Anyway, onto the bowling. The injuries of both Chris Rushworth and Oliver Hannam-Dalby are massive. I mean, I mentioned it at the top of the show, but they're incredibly talented and proven bowlers, both with career bowling averages in the low 20s, very controlled, both economies under 3 careers, and these are careers that spanned over 10 or so years, especially Chris Rushworth. So yeah, Warwickshire looked like a really strong bowling lineup with these two opening the bowling, but without them and without Chris Wokes for the meantime, this bowling lineup all of a sudden looks again like it will be really struggling to take 20 wickets and winning more games in 2024. The addition of Ethan Bamber, I think, is a really, really important one. Having, he's been thrust into that opening role, sort of an opening and leadership role of this lineup because of the lack of Hannam-Dalby and Chris Rushworth, and I think he would have probably hoped he could have had a bit of time deputising underneath them for a little while. And so yeah, he'll be almost straight into it. And his opening spell of the first day of the season against Sussex, he looked the part. He looked the leader of the attack, and he's continued to do so in the next 3 games. After a downtrend in a Middlesex team that were in Division 2, I wasn't looking too positively towards Ethan Bamber going into this season, but I think his performances and his talent will shine through, and I think he's apparently seeming to fit it very well into this Warwickshire team, and is already sort of a big part of their lineup and a big part of their dressing room. So yeah, he'll definitely get the overs to kind of prove himself maybe more than he did in a sort of down year for Middlesex. But yeah, he was, with those 2 seamers out, he will need to really hold his own and really make a big deal out of the time he has at the crease. And in the same way, when it comes to sort of the devoid of leaders comment for this bowling lineup, Ed Barnard, I think, will need to have a really strong year bowling this year because, to make the sort of already laboured point that I've made in this bowling preview, without those two opening bowlers, you kind of have got a lot of overs to fill from seam bowlers in the early season. And Ed Barnard is a really important part of that. He looked really good. He's a very talented fifth or fourth seamer, but it's just a case of him now kind of almost becoming an opening bowler, being your second seamer, maybe your third seamer, rather than your fourth or fifth. So it'll be interesting to see how that sort of pans out over a longer period of time. I think he's done fairly well to begin with, but it'll be just interesting to see how he does. The return of Hassan Ali will be a real relief for Warwickshire when it comes to May with those two injuries, as I keep mentioning. But he had a really tough season last year when he came. He played 3 matches and had a really high averages, got bashed around a lot. So whether he'll be looking for a sort of a bigger return and maybe a bit of a roaring back into county cricket in England. But again, he'll be kind of coming in from Mesa to September, and I think he has the ability. He's one of those bowlers who's right in the contest always. And yeah, he'll be, his skiddy action, I think, will prove helpful. And I think he's got real abilities. Hassan Ali, I think obviously everyone knows that from seeing him bowl for Pakistan, but it's just it's a case of him sort of living up to that for Warwickshire, and we'll see if he does. And consistent performer Craig Miles will hope for some more opportunities, and he obviously will probably get them. He's got over 350 first-class wickets, and he's just he's a solid option for the Warwickshire brass. Like he's kind of an option that they might not seem overly attractive in the sense of he's not a young bowler who they can look to get better. But I think it's more of a case of he's a proven performer that they know, he'll be able to hold up an end, or he'll be able to fill in some overs here and there throughout the season. Young bowlers in Chase Simmons and Michael Booth are probably the big hopes to step forward and sort of be a big part of this Red Bull 11. I mean, Chase Simmons is particularly more of an outside chance to think he's got a real upside and ability to bowl fast. But I think Boothie is going to be a bit more of a straight into the lineup, and he has been. He's been in all 3 teams so far. So yeah, he'll be looking to sort of up on his 2024. He had a pretty good 2024, kind of establishing himself as a team player. But I think Booth, going into 2025, will have looked for this to be a big season where he plays all 14 or near enough all 14. And again, he started the season really well. Again, having talked about his batting and how solid he looked against up at Chesley Street, it was also his best bowling, sort of career bowling as well. He looked brilliant and bowled fast and swung the ball late, which is always an important thing for any sort of first-class cricketer. If you can do that, you're going to be able to take wickets at this level because there's not as many quicker bowlers in the first-class setups around the country. But his consistency has looked a hell of a lot better. I think last year he struggled for that a little bit at points, but now his economy over the kind of period of a day is looking a lot more healthy and being able to be relied on by Alex Davies to really hold up an end and put some pressure on bowlers rather than maybe just being a sort of a short ball wicket-taking option. So yeah, I would say his skiddy fast bowling, similar to Hassan Ali in many ways, it is a kind of a rarity in first class cricket. So again, that can help. But his ability to swing it late has been a real, big upswing for him going into 2025 and sort of looking how he's looking. So yeah, the Bears will hope he and all of the other bowlers can kind of fill in for those 2 opening bowlers who I think Rushworth is going to be back soon, but or one of them is kind of out for a longer period of time. I think it's Rushworth, and then Hannam Dalby is hoping to come back a bit sooner. It could be the other way around. But so without them, I think they'll really need these bowlers to really step up and have a really good time of it. In the spin bowling department, if I was sort of talking about this totally as a preview before the season, I would have been sort of talking about Danny Briggs and Jake Lintott as a kind of 2. Danny Briggs is a sort of senior pro. Everyone knows Danny Briggs. He's had a very good career. But last year had a real struggle with the ball in the matches he played. He bowled 192 overs at an average of 87 in 8 first-class matches. Jake Lintott, on the other hand, only played in 1 match. He took 3 wickets in 7 overs for an average of 6. So, of course, it's one of those funny ones where if you look at the 2 of them, it'd be like the person who played a lot and didn't do particularly well versus the person who played sort of nearly nothing and did do well. I think Briggs is one of those it looks a bit worse than it probably is. I mean, personally, he's also a brilliant fielder. I know that from just watching him at Sussex when he was there, and a very handy batter. Lintott also can hold a bat himself, but I think it's one of those where hopefully Briggs will be able to bounce back from that season, or whether or not Warwickshire will just look for him to be a bit more of a white ball specialist again. And again, sort of as I've mentioned, these were the two I would have been talking about, but again, Warwickshire in the start of the season have gone for a bit of a younger option in the selection of Tazim Chowdhury, the 18-year-old leg spinner. Again, I can't say I knew much about him before this season, but when I saw him bowl against Sussex on that day one pitch, and as the wicket began to turn on a pretty placid Edgbaston pitch for round one, he looked the part. He looked consistent. He looked able to sort of hold up an end. So it'd be interesting to sort of see how his career begins and career progresses in this first season, and how much options he will be able to get. But he's looking like the spinner they've been picking to begin the season, and he's done pretty well at it. He's taken a few wickets, and took some particularly nice ones, I'd say. I feel like it'd be remiss not to mention Rob Yates' off spin as well. He took 16 wickets last year. And again, I think he's pretty much the classic modern spinner in some ways. I think he only really comes on when lefties are in. I know he bowled for quite a long period of time against Sussex's lefties again on that round one match where I was watching a bit more. He looks the part when he bowls that spin. He does get it up and down. He's not so much of an all-rounder, but he for a batter who just bowls some part-time offies, I think he is a really good threat and has the ability to take wickets, as he showed last year. So I don't think he'll be playing much, bowling much when maybe the season has got, the Warwickshire have got a full bowling lineup set up, but to begin the season, I think he's getting quite a few overs in, and has looked pretty good. And I think he can be called on to be a frontline spinner if they feel Tazim Chowdhury is and maybe not performing, and they want to put an extra batter in or an extra seamer in. So yeah, that will be interesting to see. Overall, I think 2025 as a season, I think it was incredibly difficult to predict for Warwickshire. They looked quite remiss of opportunities to win games in 2024. They had a few departures, really important ones, as I say, with Will Rhodes and Michael Burgess's retirement. So it's one of those where they're kind of poised in a position where, it was in 2021, they were the last team to win the county championship who weren't named Surrey. So, as recently as that, they were kind of one of the top teams. Last year, they sort of stayed up by the virtue of scoring a lot of bonus points in draws and for not losing as much. So I think going into the season, there was a lot of optimism. I think I saw Alex Davies talking in an interview about, wanting to challenge for the title, and this was like early on in the pre-season. So whether or not that may have changed over the course of the pre-season or over the course of the off-season with regards to the moves that happened and the things that changed in Warwickshire's team, or whether or not they do really believe in this this young team in general who will be sort of replacing these senior pros. I'm not too sure about it. I don't think they'll kind of challenge near the top of the table. I think it'll be more interesting to see how they fare around at kind of nearer the bottom of the table. Again, I'm not entirely sure with Warwickshire. I think it could be one of those things, they start getting a really good vibe around the team, the young players start to play well, and all of a sudden they're looking nearer the top of the lineup. I think over the course of a full season, I don't think they'll be able to stack up with the sort of top teams in Division 1. But their win at Durham sort of showed they have a real, grit and determination to win games, maybe more so than they did in 2024. And players like Booth and sort of young players emerging into the lineup, Tazim Chowdhury, of that ilk, if a few of them can really establish themselves, which I think Boothie is kind of already doing, and a few other players will definitely do, it will be very interesting to see how they do. So sort of, I'm not really giving you a strong pro or against Warwickshire sort of thing here, but I guess it's just a case of they need to focus on staying in the division. I guess with any big club that's the case, and they'll be hoping Tom Latham can kind of come along soon and be able to sort of be a saviour. So I don't think they'll be in a title charge this season. I think they'll probably end up being around that mid-table positions again. Whether or not they'll be sort of dropping nearer the bottom, I think is a bit more to do with their their batting, and if they can sort of stay in games with these young batters. I think the bowling, despite the injuries, will be able to be there and maybe win a few more games than they did in 2024. Anyway, that is kind of the roundup here for Warwickshire. I hope you have enjoyed, and anyway, make sure you check out the other videos I've been doing here on the County Chat channel. If you haven't subscribed, give it a subscribe. Obviously like the video and all that good stuff to get more people seeing these videos. Anyway, thank you very much for watching, and goodbye.